In a blinding snowstorm, a starving little girl bangs on a billionaire's car, begging for 1 minute of warmth. He almost drives away, until she whispers 4 words her dead mother left behind. Moments later, the car locks, the storm closes in, and the truth begins to kill. The storm arrived without mercy. Snow fell sideways over downtown Chicago, swallowing traffic lights, burying sidewalks, erasing every footprint the moment it was made. The city looked like it was trying to forget itself. Asher Voss, 35, stepped out of the glass tower bearing his name. His tailored black coat barely moved in the wind. Wealth insulated him from most things: noise, hunger, fear. But tonight, even money could not silence the storm. His limousine waited at the curb engine, humming, windows dark. Dante Rourke, 45. His bodyguard scanned the street with practiced boredom. Across the road near a closed coffee shop, a small figure struggled forward. She couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Lumi Wynn pulled a torn green coat tighter around her thin body. Snow soaked through her shoes. Her fingers were red, swollen, shaking so badly she could barely clench them. Every breath scraped her chest like broken glass. She had been told not to stop. She had been told not to trust cars like this. But the storm was winning. Lumi looked at the limousine the way drowning people look at light through water. Warmth. Shelter. 1 minute to breathe. Asher reached the rear door, already halfway inside his thoughts. Quarterly losses, board votes, a past he kept sealed behind success. Then he heard it. A soft, desperate knock. Not loud, not demanding, just stubborn. Asher froze. The knock came again, small knuckles against thick glass. Outside the window stood the little girl, Snow, clinging to her hair, eyes too old for her face. She didn't beg. She only mouthed 2 words through the fogged glass. Please. Cold. For the first time that night, Asher didn't get into the car. Dante stepped between the girl and the car instantly. Hey, kid. Go home, he said, not unkindly, but firmly. Lumi shook her head. Snow melted on her lashes, dripping like tears. She didn't have energy to cry. I don't have one. Asher watched from inches away, separated by bulletproof glass and privilege. He had seen children like her before, through windows, from stages in charity videos, muted before meetings. This was different. She wasn't asking for money. She was asking not to disappear. Sir Dante murmured, it's dangerous. Weather, liability. Asher sighed. Just give her something. He cracked the window an inch. Cold air rushed in violently. Lumi leaned closer, her voice trembling but urgent. Please, just 1 minute. Snow's eating me. The phrase hit wrong. Not poetic. Not rehearsed. Real. Asher glanced past her at the driver, Nabil Khoury, 42, hands steady on the wheel. Nabil avoided his eyes. Then Lumi's gaze snapped sharply toward the driver. Her expression changed. Fear not of the storm, but of something she'd heard. Nabil spoke softly into his phone, in Arabic voice, low and fast. When he gets in, lock it. No witnesses. Lumi's breath caught. She slammed her palm against the glass again, harder this time. Don't ride, she blurted, eyes locked on Asher. He's lying. The street seemed to fall silent under the snow. Asher stared at her. What did you say? Lumi swallowed, shaking. My mom said, when people whisper like that, someone gets hurt. Asher studied the driver in the mirror. Nabil smiled politely. Asher felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. Against every instinct he had trained himself to obey, he reached for the door handle. Get in, he said quietly. And for the first time in years, he let a stranger into his world. The door closed. Silence rushed in, thick, warm, unreal. Lumi collapsed onto the leather seat, curling inward, teeth chattering violently. Heat blasted from the vents. Her small body reacted like it had been starving for this moment. Asher shrugged off his gloves and held them out. She hesitated, then slipped her frozen hands inside. They were too big. Too clean. Too expensive. Asher cleared his throat. What's your name? She stared at the floor. Lumi. Last name. She reached into her coat and pulled out a creased photograph, a young woman holding a baby, smiling despite exhaustion. My mom, she said. Her name was Maris Wynn. The name struck Asher like a blade. His breath stopped. The car seemed to tilt. Maris Wynn. A woman from years ago. A translator. A witness. Someone he had promised would be protected, then forgotten under lawyers' silence and fear. She's gone, Asher asked, voice barely there. Lumi nodded. Car accident. Snow night. Like this? Her fingers tightened around the photo. She told me, if I ever met you, I should say something. Asher leaned forward, heart pounding. What Lumi lifted her eyes to his clear, steady, devastating. She spoke slowly, carefully, like repeating a final instruction. Tell me you're sorry. The words shattered him. Asher Voss, who had stood before court's camera's enemies, broke apart in the back of his own car. Tears came before he could stop them. Lumi didn't flinch. She just watched him quietly. Because this wasn't about comfort. It was about truth catching up in the middle of a storm. Asher turned his face away, fast embarrassed by his own tears, as if crying was something a man like him wasn't allowed to do. He wiped them with the side of his glove, but the sting behind his eyes stayed. Lumi sat perfectly still, holding the photograph like it might fly away if she loosened her fingers. Her thin shoulders rose and fell in shallow breaths. Outside, the blizzard kept screaming at the windows. Dante leaned in from the front passenger seat, voice controlled. Sir, we should go. Roads are closing. Asher nodded, then looked up toward the rearview mirror. Nabil Curi's eyes met his only for a second. A polite driver's gaze. Professional. Blank. But there was something else underneath. A flicker. A quiet confidence that didn't belong to an employee. Asher lowered his voice. Lumi. How do you know Arabic? Lumi's throat bobbed as she swallowed. I don't. I just know when people whisper like knives. Asher stared at the driver's hands. They were steady. Too steady. No nervousness in a storm. He leaned closer to Lumi. Did you hear any words? Anything at all? Lumi shut her eyes, digging through the moment like it was a locked box in her head. He said, lock. And no one sees. Dante's posture changed instantly, muscles tightening, jaw setting. His hand moved toward the inside door handle as if to test it. Asher spoke calmly, too calmly. Nabil, take us to the Meridian Hotel. Yes, Mr. Voss. Nabil replied, smooth as silk. The limo eased forward. For several blocks, nothing happened. Just snow and streetlights smeared into long yellow streaks. Asher's heart slowed until he noticed the route. They weren't heading toward the river. They were heading south, into emptier streets. Dante noticed, too. This isn't the hotel. Nabil didn't answer. The indicator clicked. He turned under an overpass where the wind died and the darkness grew thick. Asher's voice hardened. Nabil, pull over, now. Nabil finally spoke, still polite. I'm afraid I can't. The car's interior felt suddenly smaller, as if the leather seats had become walls. Dante grabbed the handle and yanked. Nothing. He tried again, harder. Locked. A soft electronic click sounded like a coffin lid sealing. Asher's stomach dropped. You locked us in. Nabil's reflection smiled. Not wide, not crazy, just satisfied. Mr. Voss, he said, eyes forward. You shouldn't have listened to street children. Lumi's small hand shot out and grabbed Asher's sleeve. Her grip was ice and panic. Asher reached across, covering her hand with his, steadying her even as fear crawled up his spine. Outside, the snow thickened, swallowing the city behind them. And Asher realized the truth in a single sickening thought. This wasn't random. Someone had been waiting for him to step into this car. The limo sped up, the tires hissed on packed snow, and the engine's purr became a growl. Streetlights disappeared. Buildings thinned. Chicago turned into a white maze with no exits. Dante braced himself and lunged for the divider control, trying to force it open, trying to reach the driver. The panel didn't even respond. Nabil Dante barked, "Open it or you're dead." Nabil chuckled softly, as if hearing a joke at a dinner party. "I'm not the one who should be afraid." Asher kept his voice low-measured, CEO voice, courtroom voice, the voice that moved markets. "Who hired you?" Nabil's shoulders lifted in a shrug. "A man who doesn't like loose ends. Loose ends." Asher's gaze snapped to Lumi, curled into herself, trembling. She wasn't just cold anymore. She was listening, tracking every syllable like her life depended on it. Because it did. Asher leaned down. "Lumi, look at me." Her eyes lifted, blue, bright, exhausted. He forced himself to breathe slowly, to become a wall between her and the fear. "Do you have family?" She shook her head. "Just Nana. She's sick. She sleeps in a basement room." Where Lumi hesitated, then whispered an address. A real one. Close enough to be true. Asher nodded once, committing it to memory as if memorizing a code to defuse a bomb. Then Lumi's trembling fingers slid into her collar. She tugged something out, careful, practiced. A tiny USB drive on a frayed string. It looked ridiculous, like a toy that didn't belong in a luxury car. But Lumi held it like it was the only weapon she had. "My mom told me," she said, voice breaking, "if I ever found you, I had to give you this." Asher's throat tightened. "Why me?" Lumi's gaze didn't waver. "Because you're the only one she was scared of, and the only one she still believed could do the right thing." That sentence hit harder than any accusation. Asher took the USB with hands that suddenly felt too large, too guilty. On the plastic faded black ink spelled 4 words, "If I disappear, play this." A tremor ran through him. He looked up toward the mirror, toward Nabil's calm eyes. "Is this what they want?" Asher asked. Nabil didn't answer directly. "They want what you keep hiding." The car jolted over a patch of ice, sliding sideways for a heartbeat. Lumi gasped. Asher pulled her against his chest, tight, protective, instinctive, like his body had finally remembered what it was supposed to be, human. And in that embrace, he felt it. Not just the shaking of a child, but the weight of a promise he had broken long ago, coming back to collect. The limo veered onto an on-ramp. A highway sign flashed by, half buried in snow, I-55 South. Asher's pulse spiked. "Where are you taking us?" Nabil's voice was almost gentle. "Somewhere quiet." Dante shifted his weight, scanning the doors, the floor, the seams, looking for anything he could break, anything he could use. He drove his shoulder into the rear door with a brutal slam. Nothing. The locks held. Asher's mind raced. If this was a setup, it wasn't about ransom. It was about removal. He glanced down at the USB in his palm. The plastic felt warm from his skin, but it might as well have been a piece of ice. Lumi pressed her face into his coat, trying to hide. Asher stroked the back of her head, slow and steady, even as dread spread through him. The limo accelerated. Then, without warning, Nabil turned the wheel sharply. The car angled toward the guardrail, toward the edge where the roadway dropped into a dark, frozen ravine. Dante shouted, "He's going to wreck us." Asher's voice cracked. "Nabil, stop." Nabil didn't stop. His smile appeared in the mirror again, calm as a man following instructions. "This storm," Nabil said, "will make it look like an accident." The world narrowed into white and steel. Lumi suddenly lifted her head, eyes wide, staring through the windshield. "Ice," she screamed. "Left, left." Asher didn't understand how she knew. He only saw the terror in her face, pure instinct, pure survival. Dante reacted instantly. He launched himself forward and slammed his body against the seat, reaching for the wheel with a ferocious, desperate strength. For a split second, the limo fought itself, two forces wrestling over the same fate. The tires hit black ice. The car skidded. It spun hard, the rear swinging out like a thrown blade. Lumi screamed. Then her scream cut off as Asher wrapped his arms around her and took the impact against his own body. Metal shrieked. The limo slammed sideways, stopping inches from the guardrail. For a breathless moment, there was nothing but the howl of the storm and the hiss of the engine. They were alive. Asher's heart hammered like it wanted out of his chest. He looked down. Lumi was shaking so hard her teeth clicked, but she was intact. Dante's forehead bled from a cut, but his eyes were sharp ready. Nabil exhaled slowly, almost disappointed. Then he spoke into his phone again in Arabic, fast, urgent. Asher didn't need to understand the words to understand the meaning. Plan A had failed, so Plan B was coming, and whatever it was closer than the storm outside. The limousine sat crooked across the ramp, engine still running, headlights swallowed by white chaos. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Snow slammed against the windows like fists. Asher's arms were locked around Lumi, his body curved over hers in a protective instinct that surprised even him. He could feel her heart racing against his chest, fast, fragile, alive. "You okay?" he whispered. Lumi nodded, though her lips trembled. "You caught me," she said softly, as if that fact alone mattered more than the crash. Dante wiped blood from his brow with the back of his sleeve and scanned the front seat. Driver's still conscious. Nabil's hands remained on the wheel, calm, controlled, his breathing steady, too steady. Asher slowly loosened his grip on Lumi but didn't let her go. He looked up, eyes hard. "You tried to kill us." Nabil sighed, almost bored. "No, Mr. Voss. I tried to make sure history stayed buried." Asher felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "Who sent you?" Nabil finally turned his head, meeting Asher's eyes directly for the first time. "A man who cleaned up after you, who fixed your mistakes, and who's tired of carrying your sins alone." Asher's jaw tightened. A name burned in his mind, one he hadn't said aloud in years. Lumi shifted in his arms. "It was him," she said quietly. Asher looked down at her. "Who? The man my mom was scared of," Lumi replied. "The one who smiled too much." Asher's breath hitched. "Did she ever say his name?" he asked carefully. Lumi closed her eyes, concentrating. She said, "He wears expensive suits, and he lies like he's helping." Dante stiffened. "That narrows it down to half your board." Asher ignored him. His gaze stayed on Lumi. "Did your mother leave anything else? Anything she told you not to forget?" Lumi reached back into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, edges soft from being opened too many times. She handed it to Asher. It was a child's handwriting, uneven, shaky, but the message was clear. "If he denies me, he is lying." Asher swallowed hard. Maris had known. She had known he would try to forget, to minimize, to survive. Asher leaned back against the seat, the weight of years pressing down on him. He remembered Maris standing in a conference room late at night, asking him one simple question. "If something happens to me, will you tell the truth?" He hadn't answered. Outside, headlights appeared through the snow, slow, deliberate, approaching. Nabil smiled again, small and sharp. "They're here." Dante reached for his concealed weapon. Asher tightened his hold on Lumi, and for the first time in his life he understood something terrifyingly clear. This wasn't about protecting his empire anymore. It was about protecting the child his silence had orphaned. "Everyone out," Dante ordered under his breath. Asher didn't argue. He scooped Lumi into his arms, shielding her from the wind as they forced the rear door open with a brutal kick. The cold hit instantly, razor-sharp, stealing breath, biting skin. They stumbled off the ramp and down an embankment, boots sinking into knee-deep snow. Behind them, the limousine's engine roared as Nabil shouted into his phone. Headlights multiplied. They ran. Asher's lungs burned. Lumi clung to his coat face buried against his neck. He felt her shaking, but she didn't cry not once. Dante led them toward a dark shape emerging through the storm. An abandoned train station, concrete pillars, rusted tracks, a place the city had forgotten. They ducked inside, just as the wind screamed louder, turning the world outside into white blindness. The station smelled of metal and damp stone. Old posters peeled from the walls like dead skin. Asher set Lumi down gently. She swayed, exhausted. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded again. "You're warm," she said. "Like my mom." The words hit him harder than the cold ever could. Dante moved ahead, checking corners, listening. "We won't be alone long." Asher pulled the USB from his pocket. His hands trembled as he opened his laptop, shielding the screen with his body. "If this is what they want," he said quietly, "we need to know why." The file loaded. A single video. Maris Wynn appeared on screen, paler than Asher remembered, eyes shadowed with fear, but steady with resolve. "If you're watching this," she said, "then I was right." Asher's chest tightened. "I trusted Asher Voss," Maris continued. "I believed he would do the right thing. But believing doesn't protect you from men who profit from silence." She named names, detailed numbers, shell companies, and finally, the man Asher had tried not to remember. Graham Kincaid, former CFO, trusted fixer, the architect behind accidents that looked like weather. Lumi watched the screen, gripping Asher's sleeve. "She recorded that for you," she whispered. Asher nodded, unable to speak. Footsteps echoed above them, boots crunching on ice. Flashlights cut through the darkness. Dante raised his weapon. "They've found us." Asher closed the laptop. He looked at Lumi, kneeling to her level. "Listen to me. No matter what happens, I won't look away again, I promise." Lumi studied his face, searching for cracks. Then she said quietly, "Mom said promises are only real when they cost something." Above them, a voice called out, "Asher Voss. Come out, let's end this." Asher stood. And for the first time, he didn't feel like a hunted man. He felt like someone ready to pay. Asher stepped into the open. The station lights flickered weakly overhead as figures emerged from the shadows, 3 men, black coats, faces half hidden. One of them moved forward with easy confidence. Graham Kincaid. Older now, sharper, smile polished by years of getting away with things. Asher Kincaid said warmly, "You always did choose dramatic exits." Asher didn't return the smile. "You killed her." Kincaid raised a brow. "No. I managed risk. She became inconvenient." Behind Asher, Lumi tensed. "She was my mom." Lumi said, voice small but unbroken. Kincaid glanced at her like she was a misplaced object. "Children shouldn't be involved in adult consequences." Asher snapped. "You made her an orphan." Kincaid sighed. "You made her a liability. You were supposed to protect the company. I protected you." Asher laughed bitterly. "By murdering witnesses, by preserving the system," Kincaid replied smoothly. "The same system that made you powerful." Silence stretched between them, heavy and raw. Then Kincaid nodded toward Lumi. "Hand over the drive. The child walks away." Asher's blood ran cold. "And if I don't," Kincaid's smile faded. "Then history repeats itself." Dante shifted behind Asher, ready. Asher looked down at Lumi. She looked back up at him, eyes steady despite the fear. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't trade truth for me." Asher knelt, gripping her shoulders gently. "You're not a trade," he said. "You're the reason." He stood and faced Kincaid. "I'm done hiding," Asher said. "I'll testify. I'll burn everything, including myself." Kincaid's eyes hardened. "You won't live long enough." Asher stepped forward anyway, and in that moment, standing in a forgotten station, snow howling outside, the most powerful man in the city finally understood the cost of silence. It wasn't money. It wasn't reputation. It was a child learning too early that adults don't always come back for you. And Asher Voss refused to let that be Lumi's story. Kincaid's men fanned out in a slow arc, boots grinding over grit and ice. Their flashlights washed the station walls in harsh, moving cones, turning old graffiti into shadows that looked like hands reaching. Asher kept his stance calm even as his pulse slammed against his ribs. He couldn't show fear. Not with Lumi watching. Not with Dante calculating angles behind him like a machine built for war. Kincaid tilted his head. You always loved speeches. But you're not the one holding leverage tonight. His gaze flicked toward Lumi. Lumi took one step forward, then stopped like she'd hit an invisible wall of dread. Asher shifted subtly, placing himself between her and Kincaid again. Hand over the drive, Kincaid repeated, voice soft. And the child walks out. You can even pretend you're a hero. Dante's voice cut in low and lethal. You touch the kid, and you don't leave here. Kincaid chuckled. You're a loyal dog, Dante. But dogs don't decide outcomes. Asher's fingers tightened around the laptop bag slung over his shoulder. Inside it, the USB felt heavier than metal. It felt like a coffin nail for an entire empire. Then he made a choice. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a USB drive. The same size, same shape, same cheap plastic, a decoy. He held it up between two fingers like it meant nothing, like he wasn't shaking on the inside. You want it? Asher asked. Come take it. Kincaid's eyes sharpened. He took one slow step closer, hands open as if approaching a wild animal. That's more like it. You're learning. Asher extended the decoy. Kincaid's fingers closed around it. For a beat, everything went still. Then Kincaid nodded, once satisfied, and slipped it into his coat. Good. Now the child. Asher didn't move. Kincaid's smile thinned. Excuse me, Asher met his eyes. I said you could have the drive. I didn't say you'd leave with it. Kincaid's gaze dropped to Lumi again, cold calculation. You're playing games. No, Asher said, voice steady. I'm ending them. Kincaid snapped his fingers. One of his men raised a handgun. Lumi gasped, stumbling backward. Asher felt his body surge forward on instinct shield wall target. Dante reacted even faster, stepping into the line of fire weapon drawn, but not fired. If he fired first, this became a massacre. If he hesitated, Lumi died. Kincaid watched them like a man watching chess pieces. Then, through the blizzard's roar outside, a new sound cut in faint, then louder. Sirens. Kincaid's expression flickered. Asher's heart slammed. He hadn't called. Dante hadn't either, at least not out loud. But someone else had been listening. Lumi's small hand slid into Asher's sleeve and squeezed. My mom said, Good people hear you, she whispered. Kincaid's jaw tightened. Search him, he ordered. Two men moved toward Asher. Asher took one slow step back toward Lumi, toward darkness, toward the only chance they had left. And in that moment, he realized the terrifying truth: the decoy wasn't the trap. The trap was time, and time was running out. Dante pulled Asher and Lumi behind a concrete pillar as the station filled with shouting and echoing boots. Move, Dante hissed. Now! They slipped deeper into the abandoned platforms where broken benches and rusted rails created a maze of shadows. The air smelled like cold iron and old water. Asher's hands were shaking, but not from fear, from memory. Maris on the screen. Maris naming Kincaid. Maris predicting this exact moment. He pulled out the real USB hidden in the lining of his coat and pressed it into Lumi's small palm. What Lumi whispered. Hold it, Asher said. If they separate us, you keep it. Promise me. Lumi stared down at it like it was a piece of her mother's heartbeat. Then she nodded fiercely. I won't lose her. Dante paused at the edge of a hallway, listening. They're close. Sirens wailed outside again, nearer now. Red-blue light flashed through cracks in the boarded windows, smearing color over the snow like blood and bruises. Asher swallowed. If police are here, why isn't Kincaid running? Dante's eyes narrowed, because he planned for them too. The words chilled Asher. Kincaid didn't fear the law. He used it. A voice echoed from behind them, smooth, amused. Asher, you're making this harder than it needs to be. Kincaid stepped into view, alone now. No gun visible. No panic. Just that calm smile. Where's the child? He asked. Asher's body went rigid. Kincaid's gaze traveled past him to Lumi. There. A glint of triumph entered Kincaid's eyes. Ah, he murmured. There she is. Lumi stepped backward, instinctively gripping the USB inside her mittened fist. Kincaid crouched slightly, lowering his voice to something almost kind. Sweetheart, you've had a very difficult night. Why don't you give me what your mother left, and I'll make sure you're taken somewhere warm. Lumi's eyes narrowed. You're the smile man. Kincaid's brows lifted as if impressed. That's cute. Asher's throat tightened. Don't speak to her. Kincaid straightened, gaze snapping back to Asher. You're still pretending you get to protect people. Asher flinched but didn't look away. Maris begged you. Kincaid continued. She begged you to do the right thing, and you did nothing. That's why she died. Lumi's breath caught a small choking sound. Asher's voice broke. I didn't know. Kincaid cut him off. You knew enough. You chose comfort over courage. The station lights flickered again. For a second, Kincaid's face looked hollow, almost monstrous in the strobing. Then he stepped forward, voice lowering. Here's the deal, he said. Give me the drive, Asher, and I'll let the child live. Refuse, and I'll finish what the storm started. Asher's hands curled into fists. He glanced at Lumi. Her eyes were wet now, but she didn't cry. She held herself together like her mother had taught her. Asher knelt in front of her, voice trembling with a promise that finally had teeth. I'm sorry, he whispered, for all of it. Lumi stared at him, and for the first time all night her lips quivered. Then she said 4 words, soft, sharp, unforgettable, don't be a coward. Asher closed his eyes. When he opened them again, his fear was gone. Asher stood. The station felt colder somehow, like the air was holding its breath. He faced Kincaid and spoke with a calm that wasn't CEO Polish anymore. It was something deeper. Something earned. You're not getting it, Asher said. Kincaid's smile didn't move. Everyone says that right before they give it to me. Asher shook his head once. I'm not bargaining with you. Kincaid's eyes sharpened. Then you're choosing the child's death. Asher's jaw clenched. He glanced at Lumi just a fraction of a second, then back to Kincaid. I'm choosing the truth, Asher said. And I'm choosing to pay. Kincaid's expression finally cracked, irritation sliding through. You think confession saves you? No, Asher replied. But it might save her. Kincaid stepped closer, voice dropping to a hiss. You don't understand how this works. Power doesn't confess. Power erases. Asher took a step forward too, closing the distance. Then consider this your first surprise, Asher said. He reached into his inner coat and pulled out his phone. He held it up. The screen displayed a live call. A name at the top, Detective Iris Keene. Kincaid's eyes narrowed. A bluff. Asher tapped speaker. A woman's voice came through, steady, sharp, unmistakably real. Asher Voss. Say it again. The name. Asher's throat tightened. He forced the words out like he was tearing his own skin. Graham Kincaid, Asher said. He ordered the cover-ups. He threatened Maris Wynn. He's here. He wants the drive. A beat of silence. Then Iris Keene responded, cold and certain. Stay where you are. Units are moving in. Do not engage. Kincaid laughed, one hard burst. You think cops can touch me? Half of them owe their pensions to my donations. Asher's voice rose raw. Not her. Kincaid's smile vanished. He lunged faster than he looked, grabbing for Lumi. Dante exploded into motion, slamming into Kincaid's side, driving him back. The two men crashed into a pillar. Kincaid's coat ripped. A gun flashed in his hand. A shot fired. The sound punched through the station like thunder. Lumi screamed. Asher dove, wrapping his arms around her, pressing her to the ground behind the bench. Snow and dust rained from the ceiling. Dante wrestled Kincaid's wrist. The gun skittered away across concrete. Kincaid snarled, face inches from Dante's. "You're dead." Dante's voice was a low growl. "Not before you." Footsteps thundered outside. Doors slammed. Police voices shouted through megaphones. Kincaid's eyes darted, calculating exits, angles, escape. Asher rose slowly, keeping Lumi behind him. His coat was torn. His hands were shaking. But his voice didn't shake anymore. "Maris wasn't a loose end," Asher said. "She was a person." Kincaid glared. "And she's still dead." Asher's gaze hardened. "And I'm still responsible." Sirens screamed closer. Lights flooded the station. For the first time in his life, Asher Voss didn't run from guilt. He stepped forward into it and let the world see exactly who the monster was. The station exploded into noise. Police voices echoed from the entrances. Red and blue lights bled across concrete and snow. Officers shouted commands that overlapped and tangled, turning words into chaos. Asher kept Lumi pressed against his side, one arm wrapped around her shoulders like a shield. Her body trembled, not violently, not loudly, but in small, controlled shakes, like she had learned long ago that panic wastes air. Dante dragged Kincaid upright, wrenching his arms behind his back. "On your knees," Dante growled. Kincaid complied slowly, too calmly for a man surrounded by guns. He smiled. That smile made Asher's skin crawl. "You really think this ends here?" Kincaid asked lightly. "You always were bad at seeing the whole board, Asher." Asher didn't respond. He was focused on Lumi's breathing. In, out, in, out. Then a sound cut through the chaos. A child's cry. Not Lumi's, higher-pitched, panicked, close. Asher's head snapped up. "Did you hear that?" Lumi stiffened. "That's not me." Kincaid's smile widened just a fraction. "Ah," he said. "So you do hear it." Dante froze. "What did you do?" Kincaid tilted his head toward a dark maintenance corridor behind the platform. "Insurance," he replied. "You taught me that word, Asher." Asher's blood ran cold. "You brought another child," Kincaid shrugged. "A boy. 5, maybe 6. Picked up an hour ago. Wrong place, wrong parents." Lumi's fingers dug into Asher's coat. "He's scared," she whispered. Asher felt something crack inside his chest. This wasn't leverage anymore. This was cruelty with a pulse. Police officers began to move toward the corridor, but Kincaid raised his voice sharply. "Take one more step," he warned, "and the boy doesn't walk out." Every officer stopped. The storm outside howled through broken windows like the city itself was screaming. Asher stepped forward. "You said you wanted the drive. You have it. Let the kids go." Kincaid shook his head slowly. "I want certainty." Asher clenched his jaw. "What does that mean?" "It means," Kincaid said, eyes locked on Asher's, "I walk free. No testimony, no confessions, no brave little speeches." Asher laughed, a short, broken sound. "You're delusional." Kincaid leaned closer. "You're sentimental. That's worse." Lumi tugged on Asher's sleeve. He looked down. Her eyes were wide, filled with a fear that wasn't just for herself. "Mom said," she whispered, "when bad people take children, they think adults will choose silence." Asher knelt in front of her, heart pounding. "What did she say to do?" Lumi swallowed. "She said, the truth has to cost something, or it's not real." Asher looked up at Kincaid again, and in that moment he understood exactly what this man was betting on. That Asher would choose his life, his name, his empire, over 2 children who trusted him. Asher rose slowly. "No," he said. "Not this time." Asher turned toward the officers. Every eye in the station followed him. "Turn on your cameras," Asher said. Several officers hesitated, then complied. Body cams clicked on. Red lights blinked to life. Kincaid's smile faltered for the first time. "Asher," he warned, "you're making a very permanent mistake." Asher nodded once. "I know." He took a breath, then another, and he began to speak. "I am Asher Voss," he said, voice echoing through the station, "CEO of Voss Meridian Group, and for years I allowed crimes to be hidden in my name." A murmur rippled through the officers. I knew witnesses were being threatened. I knew accidents were being staged. I told myself I didn't know enough. That silence wasn't guilt. His voice broke, but he didn't stop. I was wrong. Kincaid lunged forward, shouting, "This is insanity!" Dante shoved him back down. Asher continued louder now. "Maris Wynne came to me with evidence. I promised to protect her. I failed. She died because I chose comfort over courage." Lumi watched him, tears streaming down her face now, but she didn't look away. "And tonight," Asher said, "Graham Kincaid tried to kill me to keep those crimes buried." Kincaid screamed, "He's lying." Asher reached into his coat and held up the USB high enough for every camera to see. "This contains proof," Asher said, "and I will hand it over. I will testify. I will accept prison if that's the cost." A stunned silence followed. Then Kincaid laughed, a wild, breaking sound. "You think martyrdom makes you clean?" "No," Asher said quietly, "but it might make them safe." He looked down at Lumi, then toward the dark corridor. "And if you touch that boy," Asher said, eyes burning, "you'll have to kill me first. In front of every camera in this city." The station felt like it was holding its breath. Kincaid stared at Asher, really stared for the first time in years. And something ugly crossed his face. Fear. Sirens wailed closer. More units arrived, the exits filled with uniforms. Kincaid's calculation shifted. Escape vanished. Control slipped. He glanced toward the corridor, then back at Asher. "You always were predictable," he spat. Asher shook his head. "No, I was afraid. There's a difference." Kincaid closed his eyes briefly, then nodded once. A signal. From the corridor came movement. A small boy emerged, pushed forward by one of Kincaid's men, crying, shaking alive. Officers surged forward, instantly pulling the child to safety. Lumi gasped. "He's okay." Asher's knees nearly gave out. Kincaid slumped as cuffs snapped shut around his wrists, but his voice carried one last barb. "You think this saves you?" he hissed at Asher. "You'll lose everything." Asher met his gaze without flinching. "I already lost what mattered," he said. "Tonight, I chose not to lose it again." The storm didn't stop when Kincaid was taken away. Snow still fell. Wind still screamed through the city. But inside the station, something had shifted. Lumi sat wrapped in a police blanket, knees drawn to her chest. The rescued boy sat nearby, clutching a cup of hot chocolate with both hands like it was a miracle. Asher sat on the cold concrete floor in front of Lumi, ignoring the stares, the whispers, the phones. He didn't feel like standing. "I'm sorry," he said again softly. "Not just for your mom. For tonight. For being late." Lumi studied him for a long time. "You were scared," she said. "Yes," Asher admitted. "My mom was scared too," Lumi continued, "but she still told the truth." Asher nodded, swallowing hard. A paramedic approached. "She'll need a place to stay." Asher looked up instantly. Lumi raised her hand slightly. "Not yet." Asher stopped. She wasn't rejecting him. She was protecting herself. "I need to know," Lumi said, voice small but firm, "that you won't disappear when it's quiet." The question hit harder than any accusation. Asher didn't promise. He didn't swear. He simply said, "I'll show up. Every day, even when it costs." Lumi considered that. Then she leaned forward and rested her forehead briefly against his chest. just for a second. A beginning, not forgiveness. Outside dawn crept slowly over Chicago, pale light breaking through clouds. The storm was ending, but Asher Voss knew something important. The real reckoning hadn't passed. It had only begun, and this time he would not look away. Morning came without mercy. Chicago woke to headlines screaming Asher Voss confesses, while snow still clung to ledges and traffic lights. Screens in cafes replayed the same clip, Asher standing in an abandoned station, eyes raw, voice steady, naming crimes the city had pretended not to see. By noon, the board moved. By evening, the markets followed. Voss Meridian's stock fell like a body from a height. Asher sat alone in a quiet conference room, coat folded on the chair beside him, tie-loosened phone buzzing without pause. Lawyers begged, advisors warned, friends vanished into silence. He ignored them all. Across town, Lumi sat in a temporary shelter room, wrapped in a borrowed sweater that smelled like detergent and kindness. She watched the news on mute. She recognized Asher's face, but not the man anymore. He looked smaller, human. A social worker asked gently, "Do you know him?" Lumi nodded. "Yes. Is he your father?" Lumi shook her head. "No." The woman waited. "He's trying," Lumi added. That night, Asher lost his CEO title. He also lost the illusion that confession would be clean. Detective Iris Keene met him outside the precinct, snow crunching under her boots. "You did the right thing," she said, "but it won't feel like it for a while." Asher exhaled. "When can I see her?" Iris studied him. "She asked about you. That's not nothing." Asher nodded, accepting the crumbs life offered now. He walked home instead of taking a car. The cold cut his cheeks raw, but he welcomed it. Pain kept him present. In a city that finally knew his sins, Asher understood something crucial. Redemption doesn't arrive like applause. It arrives like winter, slow, unforgiving, and honest about what you've lost. Asher arrived at the shelter without cameras, no press, no lawyers. Just him, a paper bag of groceries, and a quiet resolve he'd never practiced before. Lumi sat at a small table coloring with dull crayons. She looked up when he entered. She didn't smile. She didn't run. She simply watched. Asher stopped a respectful distance away and knelt. "Hi," he said. "Hi," Lumi replied. He placed the bag on the floor and slid it forward. Inside, soup-bred oranges and a new pair of gloves, green like her old coat. "I didn't know what you like," he said. Lumi peeked inside. "Oranges are okay." They sat in silence. The room hummed with heaters and distant footsteps. Asher finally spoke. "I resigned today." Lumi colored a slow circle. "Did it hurt?" "Yes," he answered honestly, "but not like lying did." She paused, then asked, "Will you go away now?" The question cut deeper than any headline. "No," Asher said. "I'll be here tomorrow, and the day after, even if you don't want to see me." Lumi looked up, searching his face for cracks. "Mom said people disappear when things get boring?" Asher nodded. "I know. He didn't promise forever. He promised tomorrow." The next day he came back, and the next, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with books, sometimes with nothing but his presence. Lumi didn't call him anything. Not uncle, not dad, not friend. But she started saving him a chair. One afternoon she asked, "Can you read?" He smiled, surprised by joy. "I can." She handed him a thin, worn book, her mother's handwriting inside the cover. Asher read slowly, voice uneven at first, then steadier. Lumi leaned against the table, eyelids heavy. For the first time since the storm, she slept without fear. Asher kept reading long after she drifted off, as if words could stitch together what silence had torn apart. Spring crept into the city like a cautious apology. Snow melted. Streets breathed again. Asher's world shrank to essentials: court dates, therapy sessions, long walks, and afternoons at the shelter. He moved into a small apartment, no security detail, no marble floors. Just space. Lumi noticed. "You don't live in the tall building anymore," she said one day. "No," Asher replied. "I live somewhere quieter." She nodded, approving. One evening, Iris called. "Charges are moving forward. Testimony soon." Asher closed his eyes. "I'll be there." After the call, Lumi asked, "Are you scared?" "Yes," he said. "But I'm not hiding." She considered that, then reached into her pocket and pulled out the photograph of Maris Wynne. She placed it on the table between them. "My mom would like that," Lumi said. Asher's throat tightened. "I hope so." A few weeks later, a judge approved Lumi's placement with her grandmother Nana in a small, sunlit apartment, paid for by a victims fund Asher had created and relinquished control over. On moving day, Lumi hugged Asher, quick, light, but real. "Can you visit?" she asked. "As often as you'll let me?" She nodded, then paused. "You can sit here," she added, pointing to the chair by the window. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a place. Asher took the seat, sunlight warming his face, and felt something settle, quiet, earned, unfinished. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, a man learned how to stay. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood. Asher Voss sat at the defense table without a tailored suit, without an entourage, without the armor that used to make rooms bend toward him. He wore a simple dark jacket, hands-folded posture, straight, not proud, not defeated. Present. The prosecutor called his name, Asher Daniel Voss. He stood. Cameras clicked once, then stopped. The judge had ordered silence. No spectacle today. Asher raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. The truth did not feel noble. It felt heavy. Question by question, the past unfolded, contracts signed too quickly, warnings dismissed too easily, names he chose not to remember. He spoke of Maris Wynne, of the night she asked for protection, of the way he told himself later was acceptable. "It wasn't," he said quietly. The prosecutor pressed. "Did you know your silence could lead to her death?" Asher didn't dodge it. "Yes, I knew it could. I hoped it wouldn't." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Hope finally named for what it was. In the gallery, Lumi sat between her grandmother and a court advocate. Her feet didn't reach the floor. She held Maris's photograph in her lap, fingers tracing the edge. She watched Asher, not with anger, not with expectation, just attention. The defense attorney tried to soften the edges. Mr. Voss eventually came forward. "Yes," Asher agreed, "when a child forced me to look." The attorney paused. "A child," Asher nodded toward the gallery. "Her." The judge allowed it. Lumi lifted her head. Their eyes met for a second. No nods, no promises, just recognition. Then Graham Kincaid was brought in, cuffed eyes sharp with contempt. He smirked at Asher, waiting for cracks. They didn't come. Evidence followed. The USB, the shell companies, the recorded threats, the pattern of accidents. Kincaid's smile vanished. By late afternoon, the courtroom felt drained like a body after fever breaks. The judge recessed for deliberation on motions. Sentencing would come later. There would be no immediate closure. Outside, snow flurried again, light, almost gentle. Asher stepped down from the stand, legs trembling. Iris Keene met him near the exit. "You did what most men don't," she said. "You told the truth when it cost you." Asher exhaled. "I didn't do it to be brave." Why then? He looked toward the doors, toward the city, toward a small girl learning how adults can fail and still stand back up, so she doesn't grow up thinking silence is strength. The park was quiet, winter holding its breath. Bare trees traced lines against a pale sky. Patches of snow lingered where the sun hadn't reached. Asher sat on a bench with a paper cup of coffee, hands wrapped around warmth he hadn't earned. Lumi approached with her grandmother, scarf tucked tight, cheeks pink from cold. She stopped a few steps away. "Hi," she said. Hi, Asher replied. They sat. Not too close. Not far. For a while they watched pigeons argue over crumbs like nothing important had ever happened. Court is loud? Lumi said finally. Yes, Asher answered. It can be. She swung her legs. Mom didn't like loud places. Asher nodded. She liked the truth, even when it was loud. Lumi looked at him, then really looked. Are you going to prison? I might, he said. For a while. Is that bad? It's fair, he replied. And it's safe. She considered that, turning it over carefully like a stone. My grandma says people say sorry with words, Lumi said, but they mean it with staying. Asher swallowed. Your grandma is wise. Lumi reached into her coat and pulled out the photograph of Maris. She held it between them. Mom wanted you to say sorry, she said. You did. Asher didn't speak, and she wanted you to tell the truth, Lumi continued. You did that too. She paused, breath fogging the air. She didn't say I had to forgive you. The sentence landed gently and cut deep. Asher nodded. You don't. Lumi studied his face, then looked back at the trees. I don't know how yet. That's okay, he said. I'll wait. She thought for a long moment. Then she said, You can still sit here. She patted the bench. Asher moved closer by an inch. Not a victory, a permission, a beginning that refused to pretend. They sat until the sun dipped low, until lights flickered on along the path. When it was time to go, Lumi stood and tugged her scarf tighter. Will you come back? She asked. Yes, Asher said. Even if I'm gone for a bit. I'll come back. She nodded, satisfied with the shape of that promise. As they walked away, Asher stayed seated, watching their shadows stretch long across the snow. For the first time since the storm, he understood something simple and hard. Redemption isn't a door you walk through. It's a bench someone lets you share one honest day at a time. The sentence came quietly. No gasp from the room. No shouts. No cinematic pause. Just a judge's voice reading words that would change a life in increments instead of explosions. Asher Voss stood and listened. Time served, restitution, a fixed term, no special treatment, no escape clauses wrapped in legal poetry. He nodded once. I understand, he said, and meant it. Prison didn't arrive like the movies promised. There were no dramatic gates slamming shut, no instant transformation. There was intake, paperwork, a mattress that smelled like bleach and old nights, a routine that stripped away choice until only responsibility remained. Asher learned to wake when the lights came on. He learned to listen more than he spoke. He learned that silence could be honest when it wasn't used to hide. On the outside, Lumi grew. Not fast, not suddenly. Just steadily, like children do when the world finally stops shaking long enough for them to breathe. She moved in with her grandmother Nana into a small apartment where sunlight reached the kitchen table every morning. There were plants on the windowsill now, a radio that hummed softly while Nana cooked. Lumi went to school. She learned to read longer words, to count past what she needed, to raise her hand even when her voice wanted to hide. Once a month, Nana took her to visit Asher. The first time, Lumi held Nana's hand so tight her fingers turned white. The room was plain, the chairs bolted down, the air too still. Asher walked in wearing gray. He looked thinner, older, quieter. He stopped 3 steps away and waited. Lumi studied him like she was checking if a bridge would hold. You came, she said. Yes, he replied. They sat across from each other, hands flat on the table. No touching yet, no rushing. She told him about school, about a book she liked, about a bird that nested near their window and screamed every morning like it owned the city. Asher listened, not the way powerful men listen half there planning replies, but the way people listen when they're trying not to miss something fragile. At the end of the visit, Lumi asked, Are you cold here sometimes? Asher said. She nodded thoughtfully. Snow makes everything quiet. Yes, he agreed. It does. After that, the visits became routine. Not promises, not obligations. Routine. And routine, Asher learned, was love's most honest shape. Years passed in small, important ways. Asher read, studied, volunteered in the prison library. He wrote letters not to ask for forgiveness, not to explain, but to tell the truth about ordinary days. I learned how to fix a chair. I burned the soup. I listened today. Lumi wrote back with drawings at first, then sentences. I lost my tooth. I ran fast. I still don't like loud places. One winter, long after the storm that brought them together, Asher was released. No crowd waited, no cameras, just Nana's old car parked at the curb. Lumi stepped out first, taller, now scarf wrapped in a way she chose herself. Asher stopped in front of her, unsure where to put his hands, unsure what he was allowed to hope for. She walked closer, not rushing, not hesitating. She reached into her backpack and pulled out the photograph of Maris Wynne. The edges were worn, the corners soft. She held it up between them. I keep this, Lumi said, so I don't forget who she was. Asher nodded, throat tight. And I keep you. She continued, voice steady, so I don't forget who told the truth. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, Lumi had already decided. She stepped forward and hugged him. Not tight, not long, just enough. I don't forgive you, she said gently, forehead against his chest. But you don't have to disappear. The words broke something open inside him, something that had been waiting years to break. Asher didn't cry. He just held her there, careful, grateful, present. Snow began to fall again, soft this time, almost kind. It dusted the sidewalks and the parked cars, the city remembering itself in white. Lumi pulled back and looked up at him. Come on, she said. We're late. For what Asher asked. She smiled, not wide, not dramatic, but real. For living. And together they walked forward, not redeemed, not erased, but honest enough to keep going. Did this story move you? Share your thoughts in the comments and rate this story from 1 to 10. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you don't miss other heartwarming stories. Click on the last screen to see the next emotional chapter waiting for you. See you in the next story.